The whole house smelled like vanilla and anticipation. I'd spent the last hour meticulously arranging blue and silver balloons in the living room. A hand-painted "Welcome home, Daddy" banner stretched crookedly above the fireplace. Our son, Leo, just 3 years old, was practically vibrating with an energy I hadn't seen in him before. He clutched a small, crudely drawn picture of a stick figure on a boat, a gift for the father he hadn't seen in 12 long months. My husband, Alex, was finally coming home. A full year on a remote geological survey in the Arctic, a once-in-a-lifetime contract that promised to set us up for good, but at the cost of a silence that had stretched across our lives like a frozen sea. The terms were brutal, limited, pre-scheduled satellite calls, and no video chats due to the high-security nature of the research. I'd held down the fort, celebrated Leo's third birthday alone, and marked off each day on the calendar with a fierce, lonely pride. Now, the final day was here. When the taxi pulled up, my heart hammered against my ribs. Leo pressed his face against the window, his little voice a high-pitched squeal. "Daddy! Daddy's car!" I smoothed down my dress, my hands trembling. What would he look like? Would he be thinner? Would the Arctic sun have weathered his face? I scooped Leo into my arms, his small body wriggling with excitement, and opened the door just as Alex was stepping onto the porch. He looked different, yes, taller somehow, and his usual warm, easy smile was gone, replaced by a tight, unfamiliar line. His eyes, the same warm brown I'd fallen in love with, seemed to look right through me. "Alex," I breathed, my voice thick with emotion. He gave a curt nod, his gaze sweeping over the balloons, the banner, and then me. There was no warmth, no relief, just a cold, hard assessment, like a stranger evaluating a property. I took a step forward, ready to bridge the gap, to melt the year of ice between us. "We missed you so much," I whispered, nudging Leo forward. "Look who's here to see you!" Leo, holding up his drawing with a proud, gap-toothed grin, took a hesitant step toward him. "Daddy," he said, his voice small but clear. Alex flinched. It wasn't a subtle movement. It was a full-body recoil, as if our son was something dangerous, something contagious. He took a half-step back, his expression shifting from detached to hostile. I watched, confused, as his eyes landed on Leo, truly seeing him for the first time. There was no recognition, no flicker of love, only a chilling, blank confusion that quickly hardened into something worse. Something that felt like accusation. He looked from Leo's face to mine, his lip curling into a sneer. He didn't hug him. He didn't even kneel down. Instead, he pushed him. Not hard, but it was a definitive, deliberate shove, pushing Leo's small body away from him. Leo stumbled back, his drawing fluttering to the ground, his face crumpling in confusion and hurt. Then Alex turned to me, his voice a low, venomous whisper that cut through the joyful silence I had so carefully constructed. "And whose boy is this?" he asked. The question didn't just hang in the air, it shattered it. It shattered the welcome home banner, the smiling balloons, the vanilla-scented hope. It shattered me. My entire world, the one I had so carefully held together for a year, didn't just crack. It collapsed into dust. The world went silent. I remember the sound of Leo's soft sniffle, the rustle of his drawing as a breeze caught it on the porch, the distant hum of the refrigerator. Alex just stood there, his face a mask of cold indifference, as if he'd asked a perfectly reasonable question. For a moment, my mind refused to process it. This had to be a joke. A cruel, terrible, jet-lag-fueled joke. But the look in his eyes held no humor. It was the look of a man staring at a stranger. Two strangers, in fact, who had inexplicably invaded his home. "What did you say?" I managed to whisper, my voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. I knelt and pulled Leo close, his little body trembling against mine. He buried his face in my shoulder, his small sobs muffled by my dress. Alex didn't answer me. He just stepped past us, through the open doorway, and dropped his duffel bag on the floor with a heavy thud. The sound echoed the one in my chest. This wasn't my Alex. My Alex would have swept Leo into his arms, would have spun him around until they were both dizzy with laughter. My Alex would have kissed me until I couldn't breathe, his hands tangled in my hair, his face buried in my neck. We met in a dusty, sun-drenched library in Austin, both reaching for the same worn copy of a book on architectural history. He'd smiled, a slow, easy grin that made my stomach flip, and insisted I take it. "Only if you let me buy you coffee, so you can tell me what you learn," he'd said. Our courtship was a whirlwind of late-night talks, shared dreams, and the quiet comfort of knowing we'd found our person. He was an architect with a poet's soul, a man who saw beauty in forgotten buildings and strength in quiet people. We married 2 years later, a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. When he was offered the Arctic survey contract, we both knew it was an incredible opportunity, but a brutal sacrifice. "1 year, Sarah," he'd promised, holding my face in his hands the night before he left. "1 year of this, and then the rest of our lives. I'm all yours. No more contract work. We'll build our own firm. We'll build our future." I was already 3 months pregnant with Leo, a secret we'd been joyfully guarding. He kissed my belly and whispered, "You take care of our little guy. I'll be back before you know it." The year was the longest of my life. I sent him weekly email updates, long, rambling letters filled with every detail of my pregnancy and Leo's first year. I described the first time Leo kicked, the color of his nursery, the sound of his first laugh. Leo kicked. I attached photos, short audio clips of his gurgles, anything to bridge the thousands of miles of ice and silence. His replies were infrequent and brief, which the company had warned us about. "Signal is weak, long hours. Miss you both more than words. Love." I clung to those short sentences like a lifeline. I told myself his brevity was a product of his environment, not a change in his heart. I made excuses for him to our friends, to my family, to myself. I raised our son alone, navigating fevers and first steps and sleepless nights, all while holding the image of his loving return in my heart. That image was my fuel. And now, the man who had stepped over the threshold was not the man from my memories. He was a hollowed-out version, a chilling echo. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took out a bottle of water, all without another glance in my direction. He was home, but he was a million miles away. The first 24 hours were a masterclass in gaslighting. After his cold entrance, Alex acted as if the whole thing had been a misunderstanding, a product of extreme exhaustion. He found me in Leo's room, where I was rocking my crying son back to sleep, my own tears silently tracking down my cheeks. "Hey," he said softly from the doorway, leaning against the frame. "I'm sorry about before. The flight was hell. I haven't slept in 48 hours. I think I was hallucinating." He offered a weak smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. It was the easier path, the one that didn't involve my world falling apart. So, I nodded, accepting the fragile truce, and tucked Leo into his crib. But when I turned back, Alex was already gone, retreated to the guest room at the end of the hall. He didn't sleep in our bed that night, or the next. He treated our home like a hotel, and me like the polite but distant manager. He was courteous, quiet, and utterly detached. He moved through the rooms like a ghost, his presence a constant, unnerving reminder of the man who used to fill this house with laughter. The real horror, though, was how he treated Leo. He didn't push him away again, but he avoided him with a chilling precision. If Leo entered a room, Alex would find a reason to leave. He never initiated contact, never asked about his toys, his favorite books, his life. He looked at our son with a polite, vacant stare, as if Leo were a neighbor's child he was trying to be civil to. When I tried to force an interaction, placing Leo on his lap with a picture book, Alex's body went rigid. He read the words mechanically, his voice flat, his hands hovering awkwardly over Leo's back, afraid to make contact. Leo, with the pure instinct of a child, sensed the rejection. He stopped running to the door when Alex came home. He stopped calling him Daddy. He started referring to him as that man. The words were a knife in my heart every time. "He just needs time, Sarah," Alex would say whenever I confronted him. his voice laced with a weary impatience. "It's been a year. I've been in a completely different world. It's a shock to the system. You have to understand the pressure I was under." He spoke of the pressure and the isolation of the Arctic, but his stories were vague, lacking the specific, vivid details he used to share. He wouldn't look at the photos from the past year, brushing them aside with a wave of his hand. "I'd rather not," he'd mutter, trying to move forward. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was this what trauma did to a person? Had the isolation broken something inside him? Or was I the one who was broken for expecting the man I married to come back to me? Friends and family called, eager to hear about the reunion. I lied to them all. "It's wonderful," I'd say, forcing a brightness into my voice. "We're just adjusting, you know. He's tired, but so happy to be home." Every lie felt like swallowing glass. The breaking point came a week after his return. I walked into the living room and found him on his laptop. He closed it instantly, but not before I saw what was on the screen. A real estate website for a city I didn't recognize, with listings for small one-bedroom apartments. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just adjusting. He was planning an escape. The lie had become a living thing, a suffocating presence in our home. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I walked around in a fog of anxiety, watching my husband, this stranger who wore his face, and trying to reconcile him with the man I had loved. The real estate website was the crack in the facade. It was proof that this wasn't just post-traumatic stress or jet lag. It was a plan. That night, I waited until the house was completely dark and silent. He was in the guest room, the door firmly shut. I crept into our home office, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and resolve. His laptop sat on the desk, closed and cold. I lifted the screen. My fingers trembled as I typed in the password. Our anniversary date. For a second, I prayed it wouldn't work, that he had changed it, that this final link to our shared life was severed. But it opened. The screen glowed to life, illuminating my face in the dark room. His browser history was the first stop. It was mostly innocuous. News sites, weather, articles about architecture. But there, sandwiched between a link to a sports blog and a search for local coffee shops, was the city I'd glimpsed on the real estate site. Boise, Idaho. Why Boise? We had no family there, no friends, no connections. I clicked on his email. It was mostly spam and work-related newsletters. I was about to give up when I noticed a folder tucked away, labeled simply Project. My breath caught. My hands were slick with sweat as I clicked it open. It wasn't project files. It was a life. A whole other life, documented in neat, chronological order. There were photos, dozens of them, but not of icy landscapes or geological equipment. They were photos of him in a sunny apartment with modern furniture. Photos of him hiking in lush green mountains, not a frozen tundra in sight. In several of them, he was with a woman. She had bright red hair and a wide, easy smile. They weren't intimate photos, not in a romantic way, but they were comfortable, familiar. They looked like friends or colleagues. Who was she? Then I saw the documents. Scanned PDFs, one after another. Then I saw there was a lease agreement for an apartment in Boise, signed a year ago. There was a utility bill in his name, at that same address. And then, the one that made the air leave my lungs in a single, painful rush, a copy of a driver's license. It was his face, his eyes, his birth date. But the name was wrong. It didn't say Alex Peterson. It said David Miller. My mind reeled, trying to connect the dots. David Miller, Boise, the red-haired woman, the apartment. Nothing made sense. The Arctic survey, the limited satellite calls, the isolation. It was all a lie. He hadn't been on a high-security research mission. He had been living in Idaho, under a different name, for the entire year. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the desk to keep from falling. I scrolled further, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and found what felt like the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. It was a single saved email, a draft he'd never sent. The recipient was labeled Mark, his best friend. The subject line was Exit Strategy. I opened it. The text was short, brutal, and clear. Mark, the plan is in motion. I'll be back in Portland for a few weeks to finalize things. Need to tie up the loose ends with Sarah and the kid. She still thinks I was in the Arctic. It's better this way. She won't see it coming. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark of the office until the first hints of dawn streaked the sky. The words, tie up the loose ends with Sarah and the kid, burned into my brain. The kid. He didn't even use our son's name. We were just loose ends, a problem to be managed, a life to be neatly clipped and discarded. The grief I'd been wrestling with for a week morphed into something else, something cold and hard and sharp. It was rage. Pure, clarifying rage. I printed everything, the fake ID, the lease agreement, the email to Mark, the photos of his other life in Boise. I laid them out on the coffee table in the living room like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. When Alex finally emerged from the guest room, looking rumpled and annoyed by the morning light, he stopped dead in the hallway. He saw the papers. He saw my face. The mask of the tired, traumatized husband fell away, and for a split second, I saw what was underneath. Fear. "Sarah, I can explain," he started, his voice a low, desperate placation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I pointed to the driver's license. "Who is David Miller?" I asked, my own voice frighteningly calm. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. It's complicated." "It seems pretty simple to me," I countered, picking up a photo of him smiling on a sunlit hiking trail. "You weren't in the Arctic, were you? You were in Boise, hiking, living in a nice apartment, while your son was learning to walk, while he was saying his first words, while I thought you were freezing in a tent, counting the days until you could come home to us." His face crumpled. The lie was too big, the evidence too absolute. He sank onto the armchair, his bravado gone, replaced by a pathetic, hollowed-out shame. "I lost everything, Sarah," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the floor. "The firm I was with, the big project downtown, it all went under. I was in debt, deep. I took out loans I couldn't pay back. I was too ashamed to tell you. I panicked." "So you ran," I said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "You invented a story about a high-paying job in the Arctic to hide the fact that you were a failure." He flinched at the word. "I was going to fix it. I thought I could go to Boise, start over, make some money, and then come back, and everything would be okay. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. "You protected me by abandoning me and your son? By creating a whole new identity? By planning your exit strategy from our marriage? You weren't protecting me, Alex. You were protecting your own fragile ego. You were so terrified of looking like a failure in my eyes that you became a monster instead." He looked up then, his eyes pleading. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I got stuck. Mark helped me set things up. He thought it was the only way." The mention of his best friend's name, the man who had stood by his side at our wedding, was the final twist of the knife. This wasn't just his betrayal. It was a conspiracy. And Leo?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Why did you push him away? Why did you pretend you didn't know your own son?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "When I saw him, it all became real," he choked out. "All the time I'd lost, all the lies. He was the proof. If I didn't acknowledge him, maybe it wouldn't be true." I stood up, looking down at the broken man who had been my husband. "It's true, Alex," I said. "It's all true. And you're not just a failure. You're a coward." The name Mark was a poison dart. Mark had been Alex's best friend since college. He was the best man at our wedding, the godfather to our son. He had called me every few weeks for the entire year Alex was gone, asking how I was, how Leo was, offering to help with anything I needed. He'd listened to me cry about how much I missed Alex. He had sat in my kitchen, drinking my coffee, and lied to my face. The rage that had been a cold, hard knot in my chest now caught fire. While Alex sat, defeated, in the living room, I walked into the kitchen, picked up my phone, and dialed Mark's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and familiar. Sarah, hey, how are things? Alex settling back in, okay? The casual hypocrisy of it all stole my breath. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know, Mark, I said, my voice dangerously level. I know everything. Boise, David Miller, the exit strategy. I know you helped him. The line went dead silent. I could hear his sharp intake of breath, then a long, shaky exhale. Sarah, I can't. You can and you will, I cut him off. You owe me that much. You owe Leo that much. You looked my son in the eye and lied to him about where his father was. So you are going to tell me exactly why. His voice, when he finally spoke, was small and full of guilt. He was in trouble, Sarah. Bad trouble. Small and full of guilt. It wasn't just the business failing. He got involved with some bad people, gambling debts. He owed a lot of money to someone who doesn't like to be kept waiting. He was scared. He thought if he disappeared, they'd leave you and Leo alone. The story was getting darker, more tangled with every word. So, this wasn't just about shame. It was about fear. A part of me, a stupid, naive part, wanted to feel a flicker of sympathy. He was trying to protect us. But the next words out of Mark's mouth extinguished that flicker for good. He told me you two were separating, Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. He said the marriage was already over, that you knew about the money problems, and that you'd agreed to this plan. He said the Arctic story was just a cover for family and friends, to make the split less messy. He said you were going to file for divorce while he was gone. He made me believe I was helping you both start new lives. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. The betrayal was so much more profound than I could have imagined. Alex hadn't just run from his problems. He had rewritten our entire reality. He had painted me as a willing participant in our separation to his best friend, ensuring no one would come looking for the truth. He had planned to completely and utterly abandon us, leaving me to believe he was working to secure our future while he was actively dismantling it. He lied to you, Mark, I said, my voice hollow. He lied about everything. We weren't separating. I thought we were building a life together. I waited for him. Our son waited for him. A choked sob came from the other end of the line. Oh God, Sarah, I am so sorry. I never would have. If I had known. But you didn't ask, did you? I countered, the anger returning, hot and fierce. You never once called me and asked, Hey Sarah, is it true you and Alex are getting a divorce? You just took the word of a desperate, lying man and helped him vanish. The silence was his answer. I didn't need his apologies. They were useless now, like trying to patch a sunken ship with tape. I had the truth, in all its ugly, devastating detail. My husband hadn't just left me. He had tried to erase me. He had used his best friend as a tool and our love as collateral. I hung up the phone without another word and walked back into the living room. Alex was still sitting there, head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. I just spoke to Mark, I said. He flinched. The final lie, the biggest one of all, was out, and there was nowhere left for him to hide. I looked at the man crumpled in the armchair, the man who was once the center of my universe, and I felt nothing. The love, the grief, the anger. It had all burned away, leaving behind a cold, desolate calm. He was a stranger, a pathetic, cowardly stranger, who had built his new life on the ashes of ours. He started to speak, his voice thick with a self-pity that made my stomach turn. Sarah, please. We can fix this. I can fix this. No, I said, my voice cutting through his pleas like glass. There is no we. There is no this. You destroyed it all. You made your choice a year ago when you packed a bag and decided your son and I were disposable. I walked over to the desk, took out a box of trash bags, and threw one on the floor in front of him. Pack your things, I said. Everything you brought back from your little adventure in Boise. I want it all out of this house, now. He stared at the bag, then at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, as if he genuinely thought an apology would be enough to rewind time. You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go? I believe you have an apartment in Boise, I replied, my voice dripping with ice. Or perhaps one of the friends you made while you were David Miller can help you out. Honestly, Alex, I don't care. But you are not staying here. Not one more night. He stood up, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. This is my house too, Sarah. You can't just kick me out. This house, I said, stepping closer, my voice low and dangerous, is where I raised our son alone for a year while you were playing pretend. It's where I waited for a man who never intended to come back. As far as I'm concerned, you forfeited your right to it when you forged a new identity and planned to abandon your family. We'll let the lawyers sort out the legalities, but tonight you are leaving. He saw the look in my eyes then, the unshakable, absolute finality of it. He knew there was no room for negotiation. The fight went out of him, replaced by a sullen, defeated slump. While he mechanically stuffed his clothes into the trash bags, I made a series of calls. First, to a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman my friend had recommended. I explained the situation calmly and concisely. By the time I hung up, she was already drafting the divorce papers. Next, I called the bank and had our joint accounts frozen. I transferred my own savings into a new, separate account. Every action felt clean, precise, like a surgeon excising a tumor. Leo was still asleep, blissfully unaware of the quiet demolition of his family. I stood in the doorway of his room, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, and made a silent promise. You will never be a loose end. You will never be an inconvenience. You will be loved, fiercely and truthfully. When Alex was done, he stood by the front door with 2 trash bags, a ghost being evicted from his own past. He looked at me one last time. I did love you, Sarah, he whispered. I didn't reply. Words were his currency, and I was no longer buying. I just held the door open until he was gone. Then I locked it behind him. The click of the deadbolt was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. 6 months. That's how long it's been since the deadbolt clicked shut, locking out the life I thought I had, and locking in the one I had to build from scratch. The silence in the house was deafening at first. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the dishwasher, was a reminder of the space Alex used to occupy. But slowly, painstakingly, Leo and I began to fill that silence with our own noise. We had dance parties in the living room to terrible pop music. We built sprawling Lego castles that took over the entire floor. We finger-painted at the kitchen table, and I didn't care about the mess. The house, once a stage for a lie, began to feel like a home again. Our home. The divorce was messy, but swift. Alex, or whatever was left of him, put up a brief, pathetic fight. But my lawyer was relentless. Armed with the proof of his abandonment, fraudulent identity, and financial deception, we had all the leverage. He walked away with next to nothing. I got the house, full custody of Leo, and my freedom. Mark testified on my behalf, his guilt a palpable thing in the sterile courtroom. I learned Alex had moved back to Boise, not to the sunny apartment from the photos, but to a cheap rental on the outskirts of town, working a low-level construction job to pay off the debts he'd run from. I felt a fleeting, distant pity for him, the kind you might feel for a character in a sad book, before closing the cover and moving on. He is no longer my story. My real story is in the small moments. It's in Leo's laughter as he chases bubbles in the backyard. It's in the quiet satisfaction of paying the mortgage on my own, with money I earned from the freelance architectural drafting I started doing from home. It's in the way my hands no longer shake when I answer the phone. I am rebuilding, not just a life, but myself. I'm rediscovering the woman I was before I became half of a we, the woman who loved dusty books and had dreams of her own. Last week, I took Leo to the park. He was climbing the slide, his face alight with pure, unadulterated joy. A woman sitting on the bench next to me smiled. "He's a happy little guy," she said. "He's got a good daddy." I looked at her, and for the first time, the words didn't sting. I smiled back. "He's got a great mom," I replied. And in that moment, I knew it was true. The man who came home that day did me a twisted, unintentional favor. He pushed our son away and asked, "Whose boy is this?" And now I know the answer. He's mine, all mine, and we are going to be just fine.